When I look at LeBron, especially his playoff success, LeBron and Jordan are the two best playoff performers in NBA history. When you look at the advanced analytics, when you look at the regular stats in the playoffs, it's absurd how great they are in the playoffs. But every time I look at LeBron and his playoff numbers or his regular season numbers, I look at Jordan and I say it's just as impressive, if not more. And then when I look at the NBA Finals and I say, damn, LeBron was great in the NBA Finals. I look at Jordan, I'm like, Jordan was just as good, if not better, in the NBA Finals. Jordan averaged 41 points a game in the finals. He averaged 35 points a game in the finals, 31. So I was thinking, what is the separator? I'm also going to give an honorable mention to some of the players that didn't make the list.
Okay.
And these are the 5 players that didn't make the list that are in my top 15. Jerry West, Bill Russell, Kevin Durant, might shock, Hakeem Olajuwon, Oscar Robertson. So without further ado, I'll start with mine. Number 10, I'm going to go with Wilt Chamberlain. I think Wilt Chamberlain is on my list. Although, yes, he played in an era that for the center position, they had a significant advantage. I will admit that. But when you watch Wilt Chamberlain, when you watch the highlights, it's not a lot of full game footage of Wilt Chamberlain, but just watching the highlights when he was at his apex, when he was at his peak, when he was in his prime, he was outstanding. He was easily the best player in the NBA. I don't care what anybody says about Bill Russell, because back then MVP voting was a lot different. They looked at who was winning the most games, who was the leader of that team, who was the most important player for that team. MVP voting was a lot different, because if Wilt Chamberlain was playing in today's game and he was averaging those points, he would win MVP almost every year. So I don't want to hear that. Wilt Chamberlain's most dominant player we ever seen, by far. Like, there's nobody with a higher peak as an individual player. He averaged 50 in 1 year. I think he even took his team to the finals that year. And his team wasn't all that great. Like, yeah, he had 2 guys that were like all-stars, but if you compare that to the Bill Russell Celtics, it's not even close. Bill Russell always had amazing teams. He had 2 all-stars right next to him. It could be Sam Jones, it could be Bob Cousy, it could be John Havlicek. He also had great role players as well, while with Wilt Chamberlain, he always had to overcome. I just think with Wilt Chamberlain, as skilled as he was, as dominant he was for his era, my reason for only having him at 10 is that in his era, again, the position he was playing, especially on defense, it didn't require much for him to have to defend to be a good player. All he had to do was be tall, somewhat athletic, and have the ability to block shots, and boom, you're a great defender for that era. And then offensively, because he was bigger than everybody else, he had a clear advantage. And because a lot of the guards and the wings couldn't cross over, couldn't do certain stuff, it was easy for him to block the shot. It's easy for them to defend. So that's why I have Bill. Oh, yeah. And then also Wilt Chamberlain. His second ring, it was clear he wasn't in his prime no more. It was clear he wasn't the focal point of the offense for the Lakers. It was Jerry West. So I take that to account as well. Wilt Chamberlain is still in my top 10, but I can't have him nowhere near top 5 or even 9, in my opinion. Number 9, I'm going with Stephen Curry. You know what I'm saying? Stephen Curry, he's done a lot these past 5 years to move up in my rankings. I remember at one point, I thought Kevin Durant was ahead of him, and then all of a sudden, Stephen Curry said, nah, no, sir. I'm going to win a ring without you, Kevin Durant. And when he won that 4th ring, he entered my top 10. I moved him ahead of Wilt because of what he did in 15, what he did in 22, leading 2 teams to a championship, where he was the focal point of the offense. He was the number 1 guy, albeit Cleveland Cavaliers were injured and won. But as we've seen in the past 10 years, a part of greatness, a part of winning a championship is remaining healthy. So I don't want to hear about all this asterisk and all that stuff. because Bill Russell, the great Bill Russell, also won a championship where Wilt Chamberlain got hurt in Game 7. So there's always been instances where injuries happened where other team took advantage of it and won a championship. So I don't want to hear that excuse. Stephen Curry has 4 rings, back-to-back MVPs, unanimous MVP, the greatest shooter we ever seen. If you look at the analytics, advanced analytics, it's some of the greatest shooting we've ever seen from an individual player, and he's only 6'3". Tremendous. It's unbelievable. His ability, his shot-making ability, his ability to shoot from 3 off the dribble, he makes everybody around him better just from the simple fact that he is an elite shooter, an elite ball handler, an elite playmaker. Because of that, everybody from Clay to Jordan Poole to Draymond Green to Kevin Durant, all these dudes became better players because of Stephen Curry's greatness as an individual player. And because of that, I'm going to have Stephen Curry at 9. I just think the reason why I only have Stephen Curry at 9 is because the other players, in my opinion, when you look at their championships, were just better. In the playoffs, you could argue Stephen Curry had one of the greatest peaks. I just look at these other guys and just individually in the playoffs were just better than Stephen Curry was. And that's no slight at Stephen Curry. He's still great, but I still can only have Stephen Curry at 9. Then also, I think defense as well. When I look at Steph, during some of those championship years, he was a liability defensively, although he was trying. His size, his weight really put a detriment on him and his team. They had to try to hide him a lot of times, and when they couldn't hide him anymore, it looked really bad. So I also take account defensively, well, you were a two-way player, and Stephen Curry obviously wasn't a two-way player. He got better as of recently, but for the majority of his career, he's been a liability defensively. Number 8 on my list. I went back and forth with this, Brian. It took me an entire day to think about this. I think I'm gonna go Larry Bird at number 8. I went back and forth with this, but I think Larry Bird at number 8, which is a great spot for Larry Bird. I understand some people might have Larry Bird in the top 4 or top 5. That's great. I have Larry Bird at number 8, one of the best peaks we've ever seen from 84 to 87. Phenomenal. Top 2 player in the NBA, won 3 straight MVPs, won 3 championships, won 2 finals MVPs. When you look at the advanced analytics, he's up there with some of the greats as well, from a PR to a true shooting percentage in the playoffs. When by the time he hits, I think it was age 26, he was damn there unstoppable in the playoffs. He was a playoff riser. Well, I wouldn't say playoff riser, but he was putting up MVP numbers in the playoffs by the time he was 26. In his earlier career, when he first got in the league, he wasn't all that great in the playoffs by the time he hit 26, which was around his prime, it was a wrap. He was getting 26, 27, 30 points at ease with no problem at all. I also think Larry Bird, at times, his rosters weren't the greatest. I feel like people overrate his rosters a little bit too much, especially in the early years. Because Nate Archibald, he was up there in age. He was in his 30s. Robert Parrish was a really good player for his time, but the role players, the supporting cast, wasn't as talented as what people try to say it was. So, like, Cedric Maxwell was good. Nate Archibald was up there in age. I'm talking about the first championship, not the other championships. Later on, around 84 to 86, like his bench, the role players were fantastic. I'm just talking about the first few years he was in the league. I think his supporting cast wasn't as great as what people claim it was. So I think with Nate Archibald being up there in age, with Cedric Maxwell being his maybe second or third best player at the time, Robert Parrish, I think he came onto the scene in 81. He was a really good player for them. I think he was an all-NBA caliber player. It wasn't as easy as people claim it to be. And Larry Bird came on the scene rookie year, and he was top 5 from jump. Literally, he was all NBA first team his first year in the league. My issue with Larry Bird, I feel like his prime was too short. I think
Because
he
of his
had 8.
back.
Yeah, he was great from 80 to 87, and then after that, it was a wrap. He wasn't a top 5 player anymore. He wasn't that MVP caliber player that we've known him to be from 80 to 87. I just think his prime was too short. I think he had 8 great seasons, but then after that, it was like, well, that's it. His prime was over. So that's my issue with Larry Bird. Other than that, he was a fantastic player. I just think his prime was too short. I wish it was a bit longer, but that's just not the case. Number 7 on my list. Went back and forth with Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, Magic Johnson, Kobe Bryant. I'm gonna go with Shaq. Go with Shaq at 7. Shaq, one of the highest peaks we've ever seen. That 3-year stretch. I feel like he should have gotten another MVP. I'm shocked he never gotten another MVP, especially how dominant he was from 2000 to 2002. And even in the later years, when he was in Miami for 2 years, he was still an MVP caliber player, which is crazy to think. You would think, oh, he fell off. Like, no, when you go look at him in Miami for like 1 or 2 years, he was still great. With Shaq, he had a 13-year run from his second year in the league to his second year with Miami. That was his prime. That was 13 great seasons where he was dominant, where he was one of the top 5 players in the NBA. I looked at the NBA GM poll. I believe it was in 2005, and they said who would win the MVP. I think it was LeBron at 1, and it was Shaq at 2. It was either, I think that's what it was. So that just lets you know that Shaq was still regarded as an MVP caliber player back then. 4 championships, 2 scoring titles, made All NBA however many times, especially during the 90s where that was the center era. So a lot of times he was going to get hoed because you have all these other centers. You had Olajuwon, you had Patrick Ewing, you had David Robinson. So when you look at his All NBAs and you say, oh, he only made first team so many years. Well, yeah, because he was competing with Olajuwon, with David Robinson, with Patrick Ewing. It's going to be very hard for him to make All NBA. But he was still dominant enough where he was able to get on the All NBA team so many times. And there was one year where he was second team All NBA and he was second in MVP voting. So that just lets you know the center position was that crazy back in the day. But ultimately, I have Shaq at 7. I just think that he wasn't the best defender, even though he had the size, he had the athleticism, he had the strength. He wasn't the greatest defender in the world. He had 3 finals MVP. I also think with Shaq, I felt like when you look at Kobe, when you look at Dunk, when you look at all these other players, Shaq had a lot of great players. And no, that's no problem with having great players on your team. But I felt like there were certain times where he didn't maximize the talent on his team. I remember in 98 with the Lakers, they had 4 All-Stars on their team. 4 All-Stars. And for whatever reason, he still wasn't able to capitalize on that talent. There was a lot of great players on that squad. Rick Fox was on there. Derek Fisher was on there. Kobe was still young, but you still had Eddie Jones, Nick Van Exel. It wasn't until Kobe came to his own that Shaq finally won championships. And I'm like wondering why is that the case? Why is it that Shaq, with all that talent in Orlando, with all the talent in LA, it took him until Kobe. They were getting swept by the
Spurs was tough.
The Utah, not 99. The roster, the talent wasn't all that great, but he was getting swept by the Spurs. He was getting swept by the Utah Jazz, albeit they were young, but they had so much talent. I just don't understand why Shaq wasn't able to maximize that team when he had a good amount of talent around him. It wasn't like he was lacking talent. It wasn't until Kobe came to his own that Shaq finally got over the hump and won himself 3 rings. And then also when he went to Miami, he wasn't the best player when they won the championship. Matter of fact, that was Dwayne Wade, as we all know. And Shaq, he was out of his prime by that time. So that's another thing. I just look at these other guys on my list and what they were able to accomplish. The level of difficulty, in my opinion, from the next guys that I'm going to talk about was higher than what Shaq had to deal with. Because Shaq, he had talent at times during his career, and he just wasn't able to deliver at some point. I just don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't understand why he couldn't do that. And also defensively, him not being a good two-way player also, in my opinion, penalizes him a little bit. So I'm going to have Shaq at 7, in my opinion. Moving on to number 6, I'm going to go with Tim Duncan. Over the years, I have underrated Tim Duncan. I didn't see the hype. I thought he wasn't as great as what people try to claim him to be. But as I learned more about basketball, as I learned more about Tim Duncan and his career, I realized that, you know what? Tim Duncan was the real deal. He was actually better than advertised. Now, Shaq, in terms of prime years, he has the edge over Duncan because Duncan, he had a 10-year stretch where he was a top 2, top 3 player in the league. And then by 2008, his knees was pretty much cooked. He was still a top 10 player, but he wasn't nearly the dominant force as he was from 98 to 2007. My thing with Duncan that I love about Duncan is he was a two-way player. He was one of the greatest defensive players that we've ever seen. And it's unfortunate that he never won a defensive player of the year, which is crazy because he was always first team all defense. I think he may have 10 or 15 all defensive teams, which is ridiculous, especially in that era when you have KG, when you have all these dudes that he's fighting against. Duncan was also a really good offensive player. He wasn't nearly the offensive player of a Shaq, a Kobe, a MJ, a Magic, a Larry Bird, but he was still a damn good offensive player. The big fundamental. Big fundamental. He was a damn good offensive player from the mid-range to the post. He had everything that you want. People talk about these like big men today.
Big, yeah.
Absolutely. They talk about these big men today. Go look at Tim Duncan in 2003 against the New Jersey Nets. It's absurd how great he was. He had the mid-range shot. He had the turnaround fadeaway. He had the hook shot on lock. He had everything, every array of moves that you needed as a power forward or as a center at that time, which made him incredibly dominant. It didn't matter if you were physical against him. It didn't matter if you were more athletic than him. He was going to figure out a way to get the advantage versus that defender. And Tim Duncan was fantastic. In the finals, he was fantastic, especially in his prime in 2003 against the New Jersey Nets, 2005 against the Detroit Pistons, and 1999 as well against the New York Knicks. And that was the second year in the league, by the way. And if you look at those rosters, if you look at that roster in 1999, the talent, it's not even close to being as good as it was when you get to 2003, 2005, 2007, 2014. It's not even close. So for Duncan to be able to elevate his teams, remember, before Duncan was drafted, the Spurs were terrible. Although David Robinson did get hurt, but they were a bottom-feeding team. And then he comes to the team next year and they're winning 50-plus games. That just shows you the value of Tim Duncan, what he provides you offensively and defensively. And just like with Larry Bird, Tim Duncan came into the league and he was a top 5 player from jump because he was first team All-NBA his rookie season at 21 years old compared to Larry Bird, who was 23 when he came into the league. So Tim Duncan, people need to appreciate Tim Duncan a lot more because it wasn't like he had the best talent around him starting off. That was not the case. Starting off, David Robinson, as good as he was not nearly the same David Robinson when he won the MVP because he came back from that injury. He was still a good player, but he wasn't a top 5 player like he was in 95 and 96. So I put Tim Duncan at 6. His defense, his offensive capabilities. I also think that he was able to maximize his team a lot better than Shaquille O'Neal did, although I think Shaquille O'Neal had a higher peak than Tim Duncan, and he had a longer just duration in terms of his prime. I just feel like when I look at Tim Duncan and those Spurs teams, he maximized his roster a lot better than Shaquille O'Neal. And I thought he carried a lot of the talent a lot better than Shaquille O'Neal, because when you look at 2000, 2001, 2002, those rosters weren't all that great, and they were still winning 50-plus games, literally. So Tim Duncan, we talk about LeBron carrying, we talk about all these different players carrying. Tim Duncan was carrying as well early in his career. It's just late. It's just a lot of people didn't watch Tim Duncan when he was in his prime. So people automatically assume that he always had great talent around him. That was towards the later years when he was out of his prime. But when he was in his prime, Tim Duncan was that dude. I will say Greg Popovich helped him a lot, because he had Greg Popovich for his entire career. And because his prime was from his rookie year to 2007, I still can't put him in my top 5, though. I still can't put him in my top 5 because he had the luck. I will say he had the luxury of having Greg Popovich's entire career, and he had the luxury at the later stage of his career to have Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard, all these guys on his roster, where he didn't need to be the best player on the team, and they still won. So I think with Tim Duncan, when I compare him to some of the other players on this list, I just think that the other players on this list, they had to be the best player on their team if they were going to win. Because if they weren't the best player on their team, then their team was going to be stinking up the joint. They weren't going to win. While with Tim Duncan, he had the luxury where he didn't have to be the best player on the roster. He didn't even have to be a top 5 player anymore. And they were going to win regardless. I just think he just wasn't an MVP caliber player anymore. He was still a top 10 player, but not MVP caliber player. And I also think that he didn't need to be the best player for the Spurs to win. And a lot of times that was the case. And the rosters were continuously getting better. They started to add more talent as he got older, and he didn't really need to be the best player on the squad anymore. So anywho, let me go to my top 5. Number 5 on my list,
Kobe Bryant.
Said Kobe Bryant at 5? Nah, I ain't putting Kobe Bryant at 5. I'm putting Magic Johnson at 5. Now, a lot of people are going to watch this and say, how can you have Larry Bird at 8 but have Magic 3 spots ahead of Larry Bird? Here's my thing, because I was doing research on both of these guys. I was trying to compare both of these guys. Both of them had an 8-year stretch where they were dominant. They were top 2 players in the NBA, top 3 players in the NBA. They were top 3 in MVP voting. Magic, I think by 83, that's when he started to come to his own, and he started to be that dominant player. It's unfortunate that he had the HIV virus, because at 91, he was still top 2 in the NBA. He was right there with Jordan. Now, Jordan was obviously best player by then, but Magic was literally right there in 91. So when people tell you that Magic was falling off, that's a lie. He was not falling off. He was literally top 2 in MVP voting. Like, he was still easily the best point guard in the NBA. And the reason why I have Magic at 5 is because I don't think people understand just how valuable Magic was to the Lakers in that era. Because people like to say, oh, he had all this talent around him and etc. But when you look towards 88, 89, 90, and 91, the talent wasn't nearly as great as the earlier versions of the Lakers. And they were still winning 50-plus games. Magic was still going off and being in top 2, top 3 discussions. Matter of fact, he was the best player. I say 87. If you want to say Jordan was the best player in 88, by all means. But he was still getting MVPs when people argue that Jordan was the best player in the NBA by that time. I just think Magic's value to his team is a lot higher than Larry Bird's value to his team, in my opinion, because I think as the Lakers over time, the rosters weren't as talented. Magic was still able to get his team to NBA Finals, was still able to get his team to winning records, to top 3 seeds in the Western Conference during that time, which is not easy. And when you look at his versatility as a scorer, as a passer, as a rebounder, I was watching, I think it was against the Trailblazers. It was one game where I think he had a triple double. And if you watch Magic, especially around 85, the jump shot started to get a lot better. He was a great cutter. He knew how to move without the basketball. You could post up Magic. He had a hook shot. He had a turnaround shot. He had a fadeaway. Magic Johnson is an underrated scorer. People don't understand that because they don't watch him enough. The dude had so many different ways that he can beat you offensively, and he wasn't the greatest defensively, but he wasn't a liability. I will say that he was a pretty decent defender for his era, and I just think he made everybody around him better. His passing, he's the greatest passer ever, in my opinion. When you look at the way that he was throwing passes on the fast, which the way he was throwing passes on the fast break, and even in the half court setting, a lot of his passes were not easy to make. They were very tight window type passes where if he's a bit off, it's a turnover. But he was barely off most of this time. And a lot of these playoff series, he was averaging 17, 18 assists a game. Throughout the season, he was averaging 12 assists a game with 23 points, 22 points, 20 points a game. Magic was an unbelievable all-around player, and he made everybody around him better. Don't get me wrong. All these great players on this list made their teammates better. But what Magic did was on another level, because look at James Worthy in his career. When he came into the league as a rookie, albeit he was a top 3 pick, Magic made his transitioning a lot better. He was able to grow a lot better because Magic was such an amazing passer, an amazing facilitator, an amazing leader that he helped James Worthy become a great player. I just think Magic overall, his value to his team is just a lot higher than a lot of the other players. And it's unfortunate that we couldn't see him following 91 because, boy, if he would have continued playing, he would have had a prime close to Shaq, to maybe even Jordan in terms of longevity, and Kobe. But because of the HIV, we couldn't see it. But I just think his value to his team was just so high that I have to put him at 5. But I think Magic Johnson, his value to his team is too hard not to put him in the top 5. All right, let me go to number 4 on my list. I'm gonna go Kobe Bryant. So with Kobe, I think last year or in the past 2 years, I've had Kobe at 5. I had Magic at 4. But the reason why I put Kobe at 4 is just some of the things that I've learned over the years regarding the rule changes, how things were in the 2000s, the whole relationship with Shaq. I have to put Kobe at 4. I have to. For the simple fact that he had the most difficult road, in my opinion, because of the rule changes during the 2000s. He was a guard, so those rules really hurt Kobe because there wasn't a whole lot of spacing, zone defense, hedging. There was just so many things that he had to worry about on the floor that prevented him from being a great player. And yet he was still a great player. He was still averaging 30 points a game. He was still putting up 35 points a game. He was still shooting a remarkable 45%, 46% from the field at his prime. And he was winning championships alongside Shaq. And he wasn't a sidekick to Shaq. It was more of a 1A, 1B situation. It's just when they went to the finals, Shaq had so much of an advantage that Kobe was like, I'll let you cook. He said, I'm going to just let you cook, because that was the smart basketball decision to do, is let Shaq cook, because he has these centers that can't guard him. It's not like it was Akeem Olajuwon guarding Shaq. No, these are guys that nowhere near are able to guard Shaq. So of course Kobe is going to take more of a reserved role in that sense, and he still got busy with Shaq. And it wasn't like Kobe was standing in the corner or standing at the wing and Shaq threw him the ball and it was a wide open shot. Like, no, Kobe had to get his. He had to get his. He had to get it out of the mud. And even with the whole Kobe, Shaq carried him to all those rings. Guess what happened? Shaq left. Kobe was still great. Kobe was still top 3 player. And he won 2 more rings. And he put that to bed. And when he won those 2 rings, one of those rings was against the Boston Celtics. During that time was one of the best rosters we've ever seen. With Kevin Garnett, with Ray Allen, with Rondo, with Paul Pierce. And he still was able to beat that team. He was able to elevate Paul Gasol. He made his teammates better. That's another narrative that people like to point to with Kobe Bryant. Say, oh, he didn't make his teammates better. He was selfish. Baloney. He did make his teammates better. He made Paul Gasol better. He made Derek Fisher better. He made all these guys better. And Kobe Bryant was an amazing on-ball defender. I think he made all defense like 10 or 12 times, 10 or 11 times, which is unheard of, especially for a guy like him who's scoring at an elite rate. To be able to play great on the other end for that long is a testament to his greatness. Also, when you look at his playoff stats as well, he was a really good playoff performer. So I got to take that to account. And in 2001, when Shaq was supposedly carrying him, look at the playoff series in the Western Conference. Kobe Bryant was the one carrying that team. It wasn't Shaq. So I don't want to hear that excuse. But yeah, I have Kobe at 4. I just think the degree of difficulty was a lot higher compared to the other guys, and he still was able to get 5 rings. He still was able to elevate his team. All right, so number 3 on my list, I'm going Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. 6 rings. I think he has 6 MVPs. His accolades are outstanding. He was arguably the best player for an entire decade in the 70s. You want to argue Bill Walton was the best player 1 year or Dr. J, by all means, but he was arguably the best player for an entire decade. Even when they won a championship in 80, he was the best player. I know Magic Johnson won the finals MVP, partly because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar got injured. I think it was in game 6. He couldn't play. So if Kareem would have been healthy, he probably would have won MVP, finals MVP that year. He is a 2-time finals MVP winner. He was the all-time leading scorer at one point. I also want to say this because Kareem, his longevity is, I feel like people don't talk about his longevity enough. It was very rare for a guy to play those many years during an era where nutrition and medical stats weren't as developed as they are now. For him to play, I think it was close to 20 years, is remarkable for a guy. Yeah. I will say that I think by 85, by 84, maybe he was out of his prime because I think Magic was the better player by then. And Kareem was losing, I think, all NBA first team to Moses Malone. Him and Moses were going back and forth, but I think he wasn't as good as Moses Malone by that point. So I think about 84, 85, that's when Kareem wasn't the same guy. So for like maybe 15 years, Kareem was one of the 3 to 5 best players in the NBA, which is absurd. Yeah, exactly. But I think by then Magic was the best player in 85. But yeah, man, he was still for like a good 13 to 15 years. He was a top 3, top 5 player. That is hard to do, man. That is hard to do back then when you don't have the nutrition. There's just so much that people still didn't know. They was wearing those little flat shoes. They was wearing all those Converses and stuff, which was not good for your feet. And he still was able to play at a high level for that long. And he won 6 rings. I gotta salute Kareem, man. He was great for his era, the longevity and the dominance that he was
The first
playing.
GOAT.
Absolutely. The dominance that he was playing in the 70s is just ridiculous, bro. So I got to give Kareem 3, but I can't put him at 2 or 1 because these two guys, it's debatable who's the GOAT in my opinion. I think I went back and forth with this one, but I'm gonna go LeBron at 2. When I look at LeBron, especially his playoff success, LeBron and Jordan are the two best playoff performers in NBA history. When you look at the advanced analytics, when you look at the regular stats in the playoffs, it's absurd how great they are in the playoffs. But every time I look at LeBron and his playoff numbers or his regular season numbers, I look at Jordan and I say it's just as impressive, if not more. And then when I look at the NBA Finals and I say, damn, LeBron was great in the NBA Finals, I look at Jordan, I'm like, Jordan was just as good, if not better, in the NBA Finals. Jordan averaged 41 points a game in the Finals. He averaged 35 points a game in the Finals, 31. So I was thinking, what is the separator? Obviously, LeBron's going to have longevity because he's in like year 23. LeBron, he's had a prime. His prime has been for like 15 years. From his second year in the league to 2020, that's his prime. He's had like a 15-year stretch where he's been a top 3 player in the NBA, MVP caliber player. He has 4 MVPs, but Jordan has 5. Okay, whatever. The separator for me, unfortunately, I hate to say that, it has to be the Dallas series. I'm sorry. It has to be the Dallas series. I am sorry, but Jordan, I don't think people understand just how near perfect Jordan was in the finals, how dominant he was in the finals. His worst series, he averaged 27 points a game. 27 points a game. Like, come on now. While with LeBron, that Dallas series was so bad. He had the better team. He had the better talent. And yet he still lost in that Dallas series. LeBron has done a lot to close the gap between him and Jordan, but that Dallas series is always going to be hard for me to put LeBron over Jordan just off of the Dallas series alone. How much he fell and choked in the biggest of moments. I just can't put LeBron as my GOAT. Just off of that. If LeBron wins one more ring and he's finals MVP, I'm just saying, if he so happens to win finals MVP and he wins the championship, then we might have to have a conversation. But right now, as of this moment, I can't put LeBron as my GOAT. I have Michael Jordan as the GOAT. Michael Jordan, 6 for 6. Obviously, he was great in the finals. Besides the Seattle series where he averaged 27 points a game, which is ridiculous. That's his worst finals. In the playoffs, he was always a playoff riser. He was always dominant in the playoffs for the most part, except maybe a couple of Knicks series, maybe a Detroit series then and there. But for the most part in his career, he was always great. In the finals, he was always great. He has 10 scoring titles, for crying out loud, 5 MVPs. There were certain times in his career where he should have won maybe 7 MVPs. They gave it to Karl Malone. They gave it to Charles Barkley. It's like, okay, whatever. I just think Michael Jordan, it's hard to put anybody above Michael Jordan because he was that dominant for his era. And in the finals, he was damn near perfect. And in the playoffs, he was damn near perfect. I just can't do it. And he won a Defensive Player of the Year. He was also a great two-way player. Not to say LeBron wasn't, but Michael Jordan won DPOI, MVP, All-NBA first team. I'm sorry, LeBron. I'm sorry, I can't do it. And that is my list. I know I took forever. I took absolutely longer than I wanted to. I was just rambling back and forth. I'm going to have to edit some stuff out, but that's my list. Okay, the final rankings. 1 is Michael Jordan, 2 is LeBron, 3 is Kareem, 4 is Kobe, 5 is Magic, 6 is Tim Duncan, 7 is Shaq, 8 is Larry Bird, 9 is Stephen Curry, 10 is Wilt Chamberlain.